So boards don't always know where you're coming from, literally. Have you ever been on an education board before? Have you ever been on this kind of board? And so boards that don't take your knowledge base for granted, it's terrific. And I remember one particular conversation at my children's school about budgeting, right? Because budgeting for an educational institute is quite different than budgeting for another kind of institution. Mm-hmm. And I was able to ask detailed questions about endowments and quasi-endowments and that sort of thing. And that was really meaningful to me, and it made a difference.
That's great. I may answer my own question. I would say my first board experience was actually, I would count it as student government in high school, right? And so I think that is an interesting frame, because we talk about board candidates and we need them to have prior board experience and those elements. But I think that high school experience for me, which was very much Robert's Rules of Order, super disciplined, was probably the best training ground for what boards should be. Unfortunately, also high school behavior, but that could be, that's another conversation.
Well, Brickson, if I can answer back to this conversation.
Please do.
It's interesting because we're talking about maybe onboarding, maybe we're talking about recruiting, but pipeline is a different story, right? And when we're going to talk, I think in this conversation about how do you broaden your search engine, as it were, and your networks, finding people who have experience from high school days, that's a gold mine. I mean, that's really interesting. And I always think on the boards that I sit on, what can we do to help young people get the experience that they might not already have? Maybe not for our board, but for boards in general. We sit on boards, we know a lot about it. How can we help them learn about this earlier?
And we're also asked to be on many more boards than we can serve, right? Yeah. And so thinking about that pipeline and that young supply is critically important. Although I will say, and we're going to be all over the place, sorry folks, but I think it is important to think about this notion of, who gets to sit at the table, and that diversity of perspective is really diversity of perspective. And so representing different generations can be super valuable and really do a service for the community more broadly by fast tracking folks who may not be of the typical age profile, but if they get this experience on your board and you treat them well and you engage them fully, they're ready for the next opportunity. But treating them well, I think a lot of that begins with the onboarding process. Can you talk to us about your best onboarding experience?
Sure. I've been fortunate in that I've had more than one very good onboarding experience. I am going to say that the keys to a great onboarding experience for me has been small groups, personal attention, lots of opportunity to ask questions and to hear thoughtful answers. I think that the best onboarding experiences I've had are not one-off. Today is orientation day. Let's meet from 9 to 12. We'll give you some lunch, and then here's this much information to read, right? That's not great. But when that's coupled with, and then come tomorrow for a meeting, and the board that you and I sit on together, there's chair of the board attention. There's next month or at the next board meeting, we'll have you meet with the professors, right? To get a sense of actually what's going on campus. I would imagine that something akin to that in the museum world might be to meet the curators or that sort of thing. So you get a high level governance onboarding, expectations, rules and regs, literally when are the meetings, which ones do I have to show up to, what is expected of me, both in terms of participation, conflict of interest, all those technical things, the science of it, and then the art of it. When we say that it's a informal dinner, you really have to go. And by the way, don't wear jeans, right? How would you know? And so that part of it, and then also the sort of high touch and check-ins. We have, I believe firmly in first year check-ins for board members. I believe in mentorship. I have just been asked on a board to mentor a relatively well-known man, 20 years my senior, big CEO, knows more about boards than I could possibly know, but he doesn't know about this board. So I'm his quote unquote mentor. It's a partnership. And that kind of partnership going on and through makes all the difference in the world. And the relationship part of boards means that every board member should be in touch with every other board member, whether it's let's have coffee or let's discuss this idea. Because again, one of the most effective things that a board can do for its governance, and one of the pieces of highest functioning boards, is trust between and among board members and the leadership.
It's interesting, I think about the mentorship piece when you can have those board buddies. And I would say some buddies are assigned and some buddies are chosen. So I count you as a board buddy. But I think that there is that importance in gaining that trust and creating community, right? And so that it's not just these notions of people who sit in a room periodically together, but who are in community on an ongoing basis, as you talk about the sort of various touch points. The board we sit on together is 54 people. So it's not easy to get personal relationships with everybody. And our terms are 6 years. So can you talk a bit about how you, and I'll just put this out. I mean, I feel like on our shared board, you come in that first year as sort of a fire hose. You just sort of observe. But if you aren't contributing by year 3, we feel like you've gone off the rails. Like it should go faster than that, but by year 3 midterm, you should be in full motion. Can you give us a sense about the pacing that people should think about in terms of the turning on of their board members, in terms of their full engagement, and when it's okay for them to be a little more reticent and reserved?
So it's such a delicate balance, right? Because you want to learn this board. And honestly, the boards I sit on, some of these people are just so accomplished, right? But it's this board, right? So they want to come in and they say, yeah, well, that's not how we do it. Well, that's how we do it. So there's that balance, and you want to show respect for the talent that they have and the skills that they have. But then at a certain point, you invariably get the email that says, I don't think my skills are being utilized. Now, for some people, if they're not a leader, if they're not a chair of a committee, they're unhappy. And as you've said, we sit on a board with 54 people. There aren't 54 committees, right? So it's just not possible. But I think this check-in piece, you raised your hand in a meeting and made a terrific comment. I would like to understand more about what you said. That can come from the chair. It can come from another board member. It can come from the chair of the committee in which the comment was made. That's really valuable. Or with this first year check-in concept, here was your first year. We hope, tell us if you have any outstanding questions. At that point, they're going to have to be very, very big questions because you've gotten the detail throughout the year. And it may be, how do I participate as a board member, right? What's my best path? What skills do you think I have? I cannot tell you how many people have said over the years, I don't know why I'm on this board. I'm excited to be here, but of all the people in the world, how did I get chosen, right?
Yeah.
What do you see in me? And you're not always told what they see in you, right? So sometimes there's a mystery there. And if you can have the communication with the person, they might say, I'm on the academic affairs committee, but I'm really good at audit and nobody asked me to be on that committee. Somebody may say, hey, we didn't know.
Right. And it's also a culture thing in some ways, right? I think that you can have a board where that question mark of why people are there can hang over everyone's head, right? It's not just the new person who doesn't know. And I think that's an interesting dynamic. What I ask when I'm interviewing for a new board is a series of questions around, why do you want me here? What's your budget size? What are the opportunities? What are the issues? And also I ask, what's completely crazy about this group of people, right? So I know, and particularly for diverse candidates, either by gender, race or ethnicity, or age, they can take things personally that aren't directed to them, right? So that knowledge of, Jim Bob is just crazy and he's going to be crazy all the time. If you don't sort of prepare people for that, they may be sitting thinking, is this just me or is this a thing? And so I would like to ask a little bit about sort of the managing the turbulence. How do you think about, and particularly your role in managing the governance process on boards and nominating processes as well? How do you think about turbulence for new board members?
So you might know that I worked in the State Department. So technically that makes me a diplomat. There's, again, everything is about art and science. Governance is everything. Any board is a governing board, right? So you need to stay true to your governance principles. And there are a lot of things that you're not allowed to do as a governor of a board or of a body. Those things you can't be afraid to talk about. You can't be afraid to say, hey, Brickson, you need to answer emails within 24 hours if that's an expectation of your board. We haven't heard from you. Or, hey, we know that not everybody has the same financial capacity. Every board says, please make this your priority, your financial priority. And whatever that means to you, we noticed you haven't given. We would love for you to be able to participate at any level. So that, there are certain things that you just can't be afraid to say. You're governing and you're keeping everybody on track. The other conversations, of course, are harder. Are they a team player? Do they speak over people? And I want to be very clear that as a woman, believe me, I know about being spoken over. And I'm sorry to say that that's true in almost every board. Is there any sort of unpleasantness, of however you would define that? Anything negative that you witness? I only sit with a certain person or people. I don't come to the this, I don't go to the that, whatever it is on your board that's an issue. There is a generosity of spirit that I think is a requirement of governance. And I think that when we can all talk to each other, and when I can say to you, hey, Brickson, I saw you speak to somebody that way, or, you excluded this person, or whatever it is. If I can say that to you, and you don't have hard feelings, you're listening, we're doing a great job of harnessing those ups and downs. But the issue, I've recommended to boards, let's make it a requirement that we have a 1-year check-in every year. That way, if you're expecting it, you don't feel punished, right? And you can say, we're going to ask everybody on the board a series of questions at your 1-year check-in. Everybody's going to be asked the same questions. Yeah. Did you participate? How do you feel about your fellow board members? Are you comfortable? Do you feel included? Do you feel included that's in a way that is optimizing what you feel your contributions are? That's a dangerous question, because I might not feel your skills and talents are optimized in a way that you feel that, but it's fair to ask.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to go back to your diplomacy in your role as a diplomat, and thinking about the places in the world where you serve on boards or engaged, or even places, you've worked from the most senior halls of the State Department to, war-torn countries. What are the sort of best practices that you think you've learned that have been most surprising from those spaces?
So not surprising to me, but I think surprising to many people. Everybody's the same. Everybody has the same insecurities, the same concerns. They present them differently. So I'm on the Vice Chancellor's Advisory Council at the University of Global Health Equity in Rwanda. And I like the way it runs. But the board is hugely international. And some are from Rwanda, some are from America, some are from Europe. So it's very international. So we don't all have a common thread and a common expectation of process. So I suggested to the Vice Chancellor that we run our advisory committee meeting. First, that we have an in-person meeting for whoever could make it in a neutral city. I mean, neutral, one we could get to. I didn't mean Switzerland. And also that we have an agenda, because a lot of times people who aren't either type A like I am or serve on the kinds of boards I serve on don't think you necessarily need an agenda. You just want to talk. And we had a meeting in New York. We all met in New York. It was so productive. Some people are on the phone. Many people were in person. So productive. And people who had never met each other before, we do Zoom calls. We've always done Zoom calls. Were able to interact, which is an amazing opportunity. And I remember going to the ribbon cutting in Rwanda a year and a half ago. Only a few people could make it, obviously, from other countries. But, seeing it and seeing each other really helped me understand this culture of internationalism, I'm not sure that's the right word, that this particular board works with, as opposed to another board. And I will say that you cannot make assumptions, and you can never make assumptions about people's knowledge. That is something that I have also learned, and that you don't have to be coming from, I used to work in all over Central America, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, whatever it is, Panama, Poland, Hungary when the wall fell, Liberia, Haiti, Latin America, Caribbean, Africa, East Africa, West Africa, Middle East. It can be New York to Washington. It doesn't have to be a dramatic context change. And it's that, why would you know about how a board that deals with girls' education in Maasai, Kenya, which is the board I'm on, why would you know how that works? Unless you are the expert in that. Why would you know how a university board works versus a synagogue board or a church board? Why? You cannot take that for granted.
Yeah, I think it's as well that from my perspective, the most valuable board experience is working on a non-functioning board, right? A dysfunctional board, because you get to see so many of those sort of bad behaviors and structural challenges that then give you an eye for how to make things right. Right. So in some ways, the best CEO to hire is the one who's watched something fail. So you're basically buying their knowledge of all their mistakes and all their sort of wrongdoings in terms of missteps. And so I think that global perspective of knowing the variety between places and things is just a skill. I mean, you go back to that sort of early days on the board, and I do want to come to our shared board experience, where we had a huge overhaul of our onboarding process. But that was sort of a monumental pillar of an event, but then we had to live after it. So I'd be curious about the after, the huge transition. And I think you've talked about some of the tweaks and changes, but can you give a sense of how you took that on as sort of successor to a board member who had, admittedly been on, I think she had been on 19 years. She said that she, when she joined the board, she wasn't married. She was leaving the board and she had a kid in college. Right. And so now here you come, as wonderful as I think you are. But can you talk a bit about how you approach this new space and in your own voice in this seat, and have put your own fingerprint and observations into work on this effort?
I came in when so much good work had been done, right? So much, as you say, change, right? And by the way, nobody likes change. That's just true. but a major, I'm trying not to use the word upheaval, but I guess a huge sea change had happened.
Yeah.
And some very wise people before me had decided that it's not just that we needed to focus on what I would call governance. We needed to focus on the health of the board as a whole and the way we interact. So between that moment, and I was not on the board at that moment, and now, a lot of people had a lot of very good ideas. Now, not all good ideas can work, in a given situation. We know that. They may be excellent ideas, but we can't execute on them. And that's true for my ideas and other people's ideas. But it was clear what was needed by the kind of change that had taken place. So we now have an annual assessment of the board, a self-assessment. And it's very tempting to add things every year but we have kept it pure, I will say, in that for longitudinal measurement reasons, we ask the same questions every year. We resist the temptation to tinker. Mm-hmm. And what I have done this year is ask people to take those comment boxes seriously, right? Because that, it's all choose your number kind of thing with an ability to answer in these open-ended ways. And I think that texture is very important, right? Behind every number is a story. So that self-assessment is going to be a valuable tool. It's already proven to be a valuable tool, and over the years, we'll really see changes. We do exit interviews, and we take them seriously. We have a series of questions and principles about them that we share with the exiting people. We have the governance committee. We have a subcommittee to do exit interviews. We have the same set of questions every year. Though they are administered in a subjective way, a person asks you the questions and you have a conversation, mm-hmm. right? So there's always a tone as opposed to a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. We feel that this is we feel we still have a standard set that we can, of questions, and we can compare answers over time. Sometimes those exit interviews surprise us. And that makes me sad because the person never said anything, right?
And 6 years in.
Or 6 years, which is what has led me to advocate for more often check-ins, right? Yeah. Or the person seemed unhappy, but turns out wasn't. That's also a surprise in a strange way. And then we have these first year interviews that are check-ins, and again, standardized. Yeah. So we can ask people over and over again. The other thing is we have beefed up I think you call it onboarding, we call it orientation, mm-hmm. practices. So we right away invite the new board members to meet with just the president and the chair of the board. So they have that initial private meeting. Now, chances are they've spoken to one of them already would you like to be on the board? How are you feeling? But this is the first official, and we do it as a group. So whether it's onboarding of 3 board members or 12 board members, it's a group event, breakfast, lunch, I don't know what it is. We then move into the formal onboarding or orientation. That's an opportunity for every committee chair to talk with, I think we do it in a breakfast format, to talk with the new board members in a relaxed atmosphere and explain, this is what my committee does. So you see me, so now you know who I am. And also let me tell you about the committee. The formal that you can read on the web part of the committee, and then the more personal, here's how we really do it. And then we keep going. We have informal dinners. We have formal dinners. We are inclusive. I mean, these are the kinds of changes, I think, that make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. And I think that the benefit, as someone who's coming to the end of my term on that board, I see the transformation, right? It's just a very different experience for everybody. And it's challenging because we're a part of a community that's continuous, which I hope all these organizations are, right? I think every museum hopes to have a continuous relationship with a board member that starts with their first visit and ends, unfortunately, with a planned gift. So I think that you want to be engaged, but for us, we've gone to school there, we've sent our kids there, we've, been in the community. So it is this continuous piece that you're a part of at this highest level, but you just want to make sure that you're enriching the relationship. But you talked about this sort of variety of perspective, and I do want to talk about, and I'll get short shrift to the sourcing of new board members, and particularly in the diversity frame. Facing Change is the effort at AAM that my firm supports in identifying diverse board members across 5 cities. And so we're trying to find a new pool or add to the pool of board members. And so I think about that a lot, and quite candidly, you and I talk about it a lot on the board we're on. We talk about diversity constantly and thinking about how do you improve it. Can you give us a sense of how this is showing up in the other places you're working on boards, particularly in Africa, particularly globally? How is this diversity question showing up in the recruitment side?
Great. I want to talk about that. And I just want to add one more thing to the last piece.
Sure.
Which is that we've also made great strides. And I think this works in one form or another for any organization in growing our connection to our emeriti corporation members. So important. And also with our alumni association in the academic board that you and I sit on.
Yeah.
Hugely important. Okay, so about sourcing of board members. So it is true that humans rely on their own networks, and we tend to group together with people we are most comfortable with. Now, most comfortable with doesn't always mean they look like us or they come from the same place, right? But people we're comfortable with. Maybe it's women with women, right? Maybe it's whatever it is. When I went to college, it was, why do the football players all sit at the same table? Well, they have a lot to talk about. They're all football players. So there's that. But as we go up the ladder, that becomes dangerous because we self-replicate. And we know that diversity makes us smarter. And you don't have to believe me that you can read Scientific American. There's an article with that title. And we know why, right? Difference of perspectives. We challenge each other. It turns out when we're angry and we don't like the different perspective, it causes us to think better. So there's all sorts of reasons why it is great to have multiple perspectives. Now, on a board, you've got different challenges, right? Many boards are made up of donors. There's even a give or get. That's one kind of board. That's going to be hard because people who have accumulated capital over time tend to look a certain way or have had the opportunity to accumulate capital. It's not, none of this is universally true, right? I'm making generalizations.
Yep.
There are boards that require that we have one alum, one person from the southern region, the northern region, whatever that is, right? So there, you need to think about what your board requires and what you need. But if you believe and you can convince your board members that diversity makes us smarter, then it is worth looking for young people if you're an older board. It is worth looking for gender diversity. And I want to say something that makes people crazy when I say it, which is do not fall into the proxy trap. Okay? So just because, I'm a woman doesn't necessarily mean I'm any different than the profile you're trying to get away from. I'm just a proxy for that profile, right? So you need to think about that. You really want diversity of thought. You really want that. So a lot of people ask me for my expertise in governance to be on boards. So it turns out that's diverse because people don't know about governance.
Yeah.
Right? And I love governance, and people think that's a little weird sometimes, but it's just true. I'm on a board where I'm actually the global development specialist, even though it is a global board for global issues. Right? But they had chosen to go the donor route. right? And so they have finance people and whatever. They have people that have resources, and they were happy to have me on without those resources because I serve I serve a diverse perspective role, and I work hard at it. I think asking all of your board members to think deep and think hard about their networks and to go explore some of the parts of their networks that they might have thought were not relevant for the board is a great way to do it. Yeah. And I am reminded, by the way, of a story that Christine Lagarde, the former head of the IMF, has said. She's hysterical, but talking to global bankers, and they say, "Oh, Christine, I'm sorry, I would like to put a woman on the board of my financial institution, but I can't find any qualified one." Okay, that's like tear your hair out. Yeah. So Christine Lagarde opens up her pocketbook or whatever she carries and pulls out the list she always carries with her. Wow. And hands it over. Wow. We all have that list. Remember, one of our politicians got in trouble once for saying, "I have binders full of women." Yes, but indeed. Here's the reality. We all have files in our head of thinking, that guy would be great in this role. Or I know this person from there. They would be great in that role. And I'll tell you another very funny story. It's personal. So I have a son who's 20 years old, just finished his freshman year of college, and he has taken up bird watching. And he finds this very exciting, right? Everybody has a new hobby during COVID. Absolutely. So like all young people, he's on the internet constantly. And he tells me last week, he says, "So I want to tell you what I did." I said, "I'd be glad to hear what you did." He said, "I was looking at the Audubon Society's website, and it says they're looking for new board members. So I've made myself a candidate." And I thought, the poor Audubon Society, I mean, I love my son, he's great, right? But they're going to look at this and you're going to say, well, who is this 20-year-old boy, right? But it's kind of fascinating because they're going to be surprised because it never occurred to them. Yeah.
Now, is he the same son who was the food blogger in DC, who was my Sherpa for all food in the DC metro area?
Indeed, he is.
Yes, so it's a very special young man. But hiding in plain sight, because if you need to eat in DC, he was your guy for years in high school. There are countless stories of you being dragged along to events just because you were drinking age and they probably needed you there instead of him, so he could choose their food and review it. I would like to talk a bit about the kinds of questions that prompt thinking about that list of people we would all have in our virtual purse or our backpack. And this is a case study because you and I are in constant conversation about candidates for the board. And recently we came off of a call, and to be honest, we are in constant communication, you and I, through board meetings with another person who's since termed off. So it's not like a sporadic conversation, it's just sort of a constant conversation. And we were talking about a particular leadership pipeline. And because of that conversation, I thought of 4 or 5 names of people that I've never thought of before in this context of the conversation you and I have been having for years. And so I think it's curious, and I wonder what commentary you'd make on that sort of shift in perspective that allows for the opening up of new ideas of who's possible.
So first of all, nobody has ever accused me of not being straightforward. So there's a little bit of that, right? Like I am very happy to say to you, and again, we have a relationship, so I think I know what I can say and what I can't say. Yep. In your case, I think I can say anything. Pretty much. But to be able to say, I've been thinking about this, or we've been talking about this. Let's get the rubber to meet the road, right? Mm-hmm. Who do you know? Think about it. Think harder. Yeah. Right? This is what we're talking about. Diversity. We need diversity of thought. We need diversity of backgrounds. We need racial, gender, ethnicity. We represent as a board a very diverse population. Is that population represented on the board? Right? And let's have a conversation. What moves this board, whatever it is, right? I know what moves the board where I'm the development specialist.
Yeah.
So and I, over time there am making suggestions about foreign nationals to be on the board, who live in America that should be on this board.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a case that, for various reasons, can be a hard case to make, but I believe it to be true, but I had to say it.
Yeah.
So you and I can have as many conversations as we want, but until board leadership, whoever that is, and in every board, no matter who the technical leadership is, there's always another leadership, right?
Yep.
So whoever that leadership is on your board, they need to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
And that is like everything else on a board, that is a process, and I have had, on boards I won't name, I have had private chats, coffees with chairs to say, so I've been thinking about the diversity on our board,
mm-hmm.
right? I'm wondering, here's the map of what we currently have. Let's look to the future. What is that map going to look like in 3 years, 5 years, 10, It's just something we need to talk about, and it's a conversation we need to have starting now. And then we hope that we never get to crisis.
I would say that it's also the framing, right? It's so it's talking to so I'm just gonna be blunt here. Very successful people tend to, in my experience, have very prescribed ways of thinking. And so it requires a level of interpretation, both on the part of the communicator to understand that way of thinking, and then translating thoughts in the way this person can digest them, right? And so I think there is that notion of understanding that conversation you just discussed in a way that's accessible to individuals who are in leadership roles. And that's just a critical exercise that takes more than one person, right? It takes more than one person. It takes a number of different activities. And I would also say that, the days are long and the years are short, as the saying goes. But these conversations don't all have to happen at once, right? You can take them at a slower pace and over time, and let natural cues drive the pacing. It's fascinating. And we're going to go to questions in a bit, but I would just recount sort of the benefit of all this and the diversity of thought. We've had, any number of challenges pre-COVID on the board we sit on together. And one of them is very public. It's about a healthcare system challenge. We have a tremendous amount of turmoil in the healthcare system in Rhode Island. And I remember our board chair saying that he recalled a conversation where chairman and CEO of Fortune 10 Bank, founder and managing partner of a huge private equity firm, and a young alumna PhD candidate were the three voices in conversation around this particular issue we were facing. And that the person who made the most salient and institution moving forward comment was the PhD candidate, right? And if the board hadn't been open to this person's perspective, to this person's presence, and set up a seat for her that was, not a folded chair in the back or on the side, but another seat at the table, and she hadn't had the presence to be able to have been onboarded in a way, and educated in a way, and confident in a way to make that contribution, we wouldn't have ever benefited from it as an institution.
There is a huge burden on leadership to make this work, and they need to understand both the benefits and the detractions, benefits of making it work and detractions if you don't.
Yeah.
And I think right now we're at a time where there may be a scramble to change the way we do business we're having this conversation. I've never had this conversation publicly before. But the follow-up, the implementation of this conversation on every board is what's going to make the difference. So I think it's a tremendously important point that you make. I really do. And I will just say this, there are so many people in the world. And our job is to find them and engage them. Mostly at this point, it's a question of finding them. And we haven't found them because we haven't looked. So for me, that's a pretty simple answer.
That's great. Let's open up for questions. I think the team on the AM side is going to throw some people in the chat with us here. Hopefully we'll see some faces. So you have questions. I think that we have Linda Silver is on. And can we see you, Linda? I know you didn't believe you'd be on camera today, but we'd love to both see and hear from you with your question. There you are. Hello.
Oh, and I pushed the button. I was going to refine that so that it was a nicer question. But so we've been working through AAM's Facing Change initiative, and we've gone, you know, museums are really bad at having non-white representation on the board. And we've done some work and gone from 6% to 22%. But I now have a feeling for, we've said it outright from my board, well, check that box. We got there. Next. And so to your point earlier, Pamela, about having a long range plan for this, how have you tactically done that so that you don't get stuck in this or get this sense of we're done, we did what we needed to do?
I mean, it's the hardest question, right? And everybody,
that's the hardest question.
Everybody has the right motivation in their heart, and everybody believes. I mean, if you sit on a nonprofit board, particularly a museum, which the point is to serve the greater good, right? It's to demonstrate people's sovereign, collections, right? To share them with their own people and with other people, depending what kind of museum you have. And it's to teach, right? So what's bad about that, right? We think that, I'm guessing you have pretty great people on your board, whoever you are, whatever board you're on. So it has to be intentional, and it has to be process. And people don't really like process, right? Which is why people laugh when I say I love governance. So be honest about your weaknesses. Where are you falling down, right? It's my fault. It's that committee's fault. It's everybody's fault, right? If it's not working, I don't believe in the blame game, but it's everybody is falling down. So let's believe that as a group, number one, and let's believe that we can do better. And then let's set some things into place. New orientation procedures. A board document that is a board expectations document that has everything on it from we expect you to make this your priority giving. I'm on 5 boards and they all expect me to make it my priority giving, but you got to say it, right? To, we expect you to be collegial, and we expect you to answer emails within 24 hours. Whatever your problems are, and then some general, guardrails. Surveys, annual board surveys, so nobody thinks it's personal. Are you enjoying your committee work? Do you feel heard? What would you make change? Now, when you do that, you hear all sorts of stuff. You hear, actually, the chair is not that good. She's disorganized. Or the staff runs this committee. I don't even open my mouth. You could hear all sorts of things. So think about that. How do you feel about that? Is that a place you need to make change? Does everybody participate at an expected level? Now, when I say expected, you need to be generous about that. We are surprised when the CEO of a Fortune 100 or Fortune 50 company comes to every meeting, and we should be surprised. Everybody's equal, but, right? Now, you have to make that clear that you do expect 100% participation, and you need to know why that person's not showing up if that person's not showing up. This buddy system, whatever you call it, start out with your best board members, and best is subjective, but you know what I mean. To everybody who's listening, you each know what I mean in your own heads, to be the partners of these new board members. Because it also helps internally, each board member, right? You may not be a new board member, but you're seeing what we are expecting of our new board members because your colleague is a mentor. But make a plan, stick to it, and explain that this is a governance strengthening piece over time. You need longitudinal data to measure. You welcome input, and you want to hear everybody's thoughts about how to make improvements, because nobody's perfect.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Pamela. We're going to go to our next questioner. We got Cara Newport. Cara, will you join us on camera? Oh, Cara went away. We got Linda back. I hope Cara will come again. I will also just sort of, as we wait for Cara to come, sort of talk about this notion of that we got enough on the diversity front a little bit. I think the pipeline and sort of, looking at the succession of each seat is the next opportunity to say, all right, so yes, we have these folks, but what happens? And there's Cara's, I think, desk. Which is great.
I'm working on it. Here we go. Maybe.
Brickson, can I just build on that for 1 second?
Yeah.
If you have brought somebody on the board because they are different from other people on the board,
yeah,
right? That's the person to ask for who do you know who's either like you or not like the people you're seeing here to expand our networks. I think that this notion, and you mentioned this, Brickson, of young people being on the boards. First of all, they have ideas that we don't even know about. And they're usually great, right? And they certainly are going to help us. And young people have different ideas than we do about who's counted and who's in and who's, so it's very valuable. Sorry, Karen.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks. I'm Karen Newport. I'm the CEO of Filoli, which is a historic house and garden in San Francisco area. And my question is about these are wonderful ideas, fabulous. The mentoring, the initial meeting with the board member, the annual review, informal and formal dinners. So on the boards that you've participated in as a CEO, especially in the middle of lots of crises right now, who does this for you? Who facilitates it for the board? Are there dedicated positions? Does it come through the human resources department or through the development department? How have you seen this work, especially in a non-university organization, in a smaller or mid-sized organization? How can you translate all of this very important, very good work that we struggle to do for our staff? This is good work for anybody coming into an organization, and we are really challenged by that. So how have you seen it work successfully?
I think it's a great question, because resources are scarce always. And one of the scarcest resources is time. So big boards have a staff liaison, and they have to that's their job, right? Let's put that aside. Tiny boards usually, I think I'm staff on one of my boards, right? Because we all chip in so much. So if I say, I really think we need a dinner before our board meeting, I might have to host it. Or I might have to explain to any staff member. It could be the chief of staff. It could be the admin. Here's how it works. I'm going to take my time to explain, right? Here's how it works. I need you to get a restaurant with one long table. I need there to be a cocktail hour. Why would a young person know about that, right? He or she wouldn't. And I need it to be accessible, and I need it to be interesting enough so that people want to come to the informal meeting. And so there's different layers of how to make that work. I think so much of it has to be generated by the board member. So you're the CEO. So if I come to you and I say, look, I'm the head of governance or nominating, I would really like this to happen. I know it's a burden for you and your staff. I'll chip in some of my time, but let me tell you why it's going to make your life easier in the long run, right? Because you're going to get a more cooperative, more relationship woven in board. And it's going to make all the difference in the world. You may say, okay, let's try it once. I'll devote this kind of assistant. I'll devote however much it costs in your town to have a dinner. If your board member doesn't throw the dinner and offer to pay for it him or herself, which is what they should do, let's try it once. And I can't tell you how much of a difference it makes. I don't know how you do your board meetings. Let's say they're one day, 3 times a year. I don't know if you have 2-day board meetings. If they start at 9, fine. If they start at 12, better. Let's have a breakfast before, not in the room of the board, but in a different room, or we're at the hotel everybody's staying in, or at the whatever it is. And let's have cocktail hour afterwards. Or let's have, if you can really do it, cocktail hour the night before. Fantastic. But because a lot of this is new for a lot of boards and a lot of staff, I think some of this good governance and best practice work has to come from your board. I have been in a really enviable situation where a staff has come to me and has said, I think we can do better, right? I've been reading up on governance. And with trepidation, I am coming to you. I asked my boss if I could, and my boss said yes, but what do you think? And then I usually pull some books off my shelf. They're actually right there. And they're board books and board sources and best practices. But the bottom line is, it doesn't take a lot of work to make the relationship strong. And if you are teetering, particularly on new members who have no idea what the heck is going on. I walked into a building I had never been in before. I had just seen it in Manhattan from afar. I didn't even know they had boardrooms. I'll not say what it was. There's like a secret password. I go up, I walk into a room, because I had been asked to be on the board. I had said yes. I knew about it. I had done my research. This was not a surprise. I knew the man who was the chair. And it's a dozen white men. I thought I had entered like an old Dutch painting. I was like, what's happening? And everybody sort of looked at me and didn't know what to say. And then, my first board meeting, so you tend not to talk. I had to talk because they were talking about governance and they were wrong. So diplomatically, I say, may I just ask one question? Right? Because God forbid you should tell anybody anything. You have to ask a question. Anyway, by lunchtime, and they were all older, men were coming up to me and patting me on the shoulder, which I think was a good sign. It's unclear. And, who knows what they thought. But that, it wasn't so welcoming at the beginning, but I felt good about my presence there, and then they made it easier for me. And, that kind of lot of work, I think I diverged a little bit, but you get my point.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know the car is in wine, not far from wine country. So I think people's wine collection should certainly be opened up for board pre-dinners. Would be a fabulous idea in Woodside. So let's go to Kelly for our last question, because we want to get you out on time. So Kelly, welcome. Thanks for being with us. And what's your question?
My question is, our board has never, ever done a self-assessment. So I was really interested in the great questions, structure of it, what you felt was a good example of an instrument that we could use.
So I think you asked in general. It's a great question, and I'm trying to think if there are board books that give examples. There may be. So generally, they fall into your role in the board and your committee work, because that opens up a whole host of questions, right? Are you satisfied? Or is the committee moving forward? Are your skills used? Do you have the staff support? Sort of neutral questions, and the questions they're really gonna. And then the board itself question: do you feel that you're part of the board? I'm not sure you would ask that question, but are there too many meetings, not enough meetings? Are they long enough? Do you feel that there's enough opportunity to interact with the staff or the president or the chair or the whatever it is? And then there's that other piece about culture, and that's unique to your board, and a lot of that is do you feel that broadening our view enough, that we are inclusive of perspectives enough. It's always 1 is not satisfied and 5 is this is the best things and sliced bread.
Okay.
And those boxes for additional comments, read them. Of course, the trick about self-assessment, you also have to act on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Afterwards.
And feedback that you heard, the comments. Someone put in the chat, the Museum Trustee Association has some terrific tools for self-assessment, board assessments, and board leadership. So that is a place to go. I think we've reached our time limit. I want to be respectful of everyone for being with us today. And Pamela, you're my favorite.
No, you.
I think you knew that already. And I'm so grateful that you said yes to doing this. And I trust that you all in AAM land have enjoyed it as much as I have. I've not had the GIF interaction that I usually have with Pamela. So that was deficient, but maybe some other time you can see my GIF library.
And if I could just thank you, Brickson, and thank AAM. This has been a terrific opportunity, and you're all super interesting.
Yes, and we'll tell the story far and wide. We will speak of this, and we will be kind. So thank you. Andrew, back to you.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you, Pamela and Brickson. What an amazing conversation. So many great nuggets, and I wish we could continue the conversation into the afternoon. But I wanted to thank you both. I want to thank the participants today. You'll be getting a recording of this so you can get all those, the nuggets of wisdom that Pamela and Brickson shared in the recording, hopefully by the end of the week. Great conversation. Thanks so much. Hopefully we can have Brickson and Pamela again to continue the conversation. Thanks, everybody.